Hello, this is Dr. Dawn Michael, and I am here with you today, all having a fantastic day. We have interesting subject matter to go over with, and many of you have sent in your questions. And this is an ongoing problem that I see with clients and something that can be very painful if it happens with you in your marriage or your relationship. So I'm just going to take a moment to adjust my live feed here and wait for a few of you to hop on. So we'll get started with doing that. All righty. Okay, so what are we talking about today? What we're talking about is what to do when she turns me down again. And as I said, this is something that's very common. It happens in many relationships, and mostly long-term relationships and marriage. And I'm going to give you the reasons why it happens, and then some things that you can do to fix it in your marriage. Now, it's a little bit complicated. I'm not going to lie. People's emotions get involved. There are different stages that people go through in a relationship. And as we age, our sex drive changes. And it doesn't always happen together. So men and women have different sex drives. So when men are younger, their sex drive is going to be higher. And for women, their sex drive sometimes kicks in their 40s. And I'll explain that reason. But it might not always pertain to the relationship. So that gets confusing. So let me first answer the one question that I have here. And again, thank you all for sending your questions in. And if you want to send a question in, you can visit my website, thehappyspouse.com, and you can put it in the comment box, or my email is located, and just put down question for the show. In a minute, I'm going to, as you come on to the chat, if you can just, so this is the question. How do I get my wife interested in sex? Okay, question of the century, right? For some of you out there. And let me just go over some interesting statistics that I have on this subject. All right. So for myself, and I'm just going to read from my notes here, most of my clients, as well as my viewers, are men. And the reason for this is because when something happens with a man's sex life, he wants to know how to fix it. And so men are always interested in anything that has to do with making their sex life better or even resolving problems. Women tend to be more interested in the relationship aspect. So if you notice, women are more interested in the communication, in trying to make the relationship better. But when it comes to a sexual function problem, most women will not reach out and try to fix it, whereas most men will. So they tend to listen to things that have to do with sex. Not to say that women are not interested, but for the most part, they're not going to seek out help unless their spouse or their husband pushes them to do it, or they are in fear that they're going to end their marriage. And so that usually prompts couples to come in and to get help if they have issues with their sex life. Okay, so men and women are different when it comes to sex. And let's be honest, men and women are different. There are different things that drive them. There are different things that turn them on, and there's different reasons why they look at sex differently. It doesn't mean that both men and women don't want it. It's just they go about it in a different way. So the myth that you hear that sex changes when you get married, yes, it does. It doesn't have to change for the worse, but couples have to work on it. And so the biggest change that I see is usually after the couple has children because her sex drive changes. She's not getting as much sleep, and her interest is more on the child. So she won't be as interested in sex after having children for a little while. But not all hope is lost. Things can pick up, and I will explain how you can go about doing that. Um, so, so let's talk about something that's really interesting. Let's talk about what about a man's sex drive? And does his sex drive decrease once he gets married? And this is interesting because it usually doesn't. So when a couple gets married, maybe in the beginning, their sex drive is in sync. Maybe throughout the relationship, after children, their sex drive is not in sync. And what happens a lot is a man's sexual pattern pretty much will stay the same once he's developed it, even when he gets married. And for women, that changes. And that's where you see problems developing, and couples get into arguments about this, or there's some resentment because he still wants to be intimate the same amount of time, but she doesn't. Sometimes men's sex drive change if they're having a lot of stress in their life, or they have some type of medical issue, or there's some other thing going on where usually health related or again stress related. But it is true sometimes after couples have children, men's sex drive can decrease a little bit as well, because then again, he's not sleeping as much and so on and so forth. But usually his sex drive will come back quite quickly as opposed to her sex drive. So I've mentioned this in other videos. Men tend to, even once they're married, have the same sex pattern. So whether they're having sex or not, they're still masturbating and having an orgasm like they did their entire life, whereas women stop this. And this is something that most people don't talk about, but what I've seen is one of the big problems where I see different sexual patterns and desire. Because once a woman stops having sex frequently, her desire does drop. And so, anyway, I'll get a little bit more into that. So let's talk about what happens to women in their 40s. Okay. So women in their 40s tend to know their bodies better. They tend to not be as critical of themselves, and they tend to be out of that intense mommy role. And so they become freer with wanting to have sex. They're more interested in having sex. But it doesn't always mean that it's going to be their husband that they're interested in having it with. But don't despair, a husband can do something about that. And that's where some of the solutions come into play here. And I'm going to go into that in a second. I'm just going to say a quick hello to everyone. So, hi, James. Thank you for joining us. You too, Eric. And Eric said, sounds like it's easier to stay single. Well, you know what? Life is about challenges, and quite frankly, there's challenges being single, because if you're single, you're still having to meet someone and not get into that really great committed sex that you can have when you're married. You get to know each other's bodies, each other's likes and dislikes. And so there's a lot to having a relationship that is really valuable and wonderful. And for a lot of couples, they're best friends and they work together with raising a family. But you have to get over a few of these hurdles. And with many couples that I work with, they'll say everything in their marriage is great and they're really happy in their marriage, except for their sex life. And they don't know how to fix it. They don't know who to talk to about it. And it can get to the point where it's very frustrating. It's very hurt. And men have reported that they get tired of asking their wife to have sex, sex. They get hurt because they're constantly told no. They don't know how to get her interested. And then from the woman's perspective, many times she is upset at her husband because he's either not romancing her anymore, he's not listening to her anymore. And so you really have a disconnect in communication. So that's one part of it. So I'm going to go over some of the things that men can do to kind of get their sex life exciting again, or maybe not exciting, but at least, they're interacting and they're having good sex, and it's not like they're having to ask their wife all the time. They feel like their wife still desires them. And that's another problem too, is sometimes men feel like their wife no longer desires them, and that can be very hurtful. So one of the ways to make it better is you really have to still romance your wife. So the two of you have to start dating in your marriage again. And couples oftentimes forget to do this because once you get married, you're in pursuit, you're doing certain things. Maybe you're buying her flowers, maybe you're paying more attention. Maybe, she's more interested in some of the things that you're doing, and you can have hobbies together. And so when you get married, sometimes those things go away. And then for women, it's still very important, but for men, it may not be as important. And so again, still going out on a date night, that's one of the things that I recommend for couples. And it doesn't have to be that you're going to a fancy place, but that you're taking the time to spend time alone with each other, doing something that you both enjoy. And so you're bringing the romance out of the bedroom, which women really desire and want. And then you can start working on bringing it back to the bedroom. If you notice in some of the romance novels, or even when that crazy series came out, that vampire series, what I noticed is all the women were flocking to go see that show. And then the husbands were really happy because they were coming back from that show and they were really turned on. And it was a big phenomenon at that time. And they were wondering, why is my wife coming back and she's excited, or maybe she wants to have sex with me after seeing that. And one of the secrets is mental stimulation. So women really need to be mentally stimulated, and much more so than men do, and teased mentally. And so you have to tap into what turns her on mentally. And sometimes we don't know each other as well as we think we know each other. And so playing some type of a game where you're doing I think one of the things I recommended last time is you can put different things into a box that interest each of you. And it could be about getting to know each other on a different level. And there could be some, sexual things in there too. And there can be some more interesting, deeper questions. And you both pull it out and you answer it. So you're getting to know each other better and you're involving each other in this. And so you really want to get her mind stimulated outside the bedroom. And if you want some information on this, you can go buy one of those romance novels, or I don't want to say it's pornographic, but you can find them in the romance section. And believe it or not, if you read a little bit of that, you can kind of tap into what women's fantasies are. And it's really helpful to know that. And then you can try it out on your wife and see how that works for you. So what do we have here? I'm going to go back to some of your questions and then come back and forth. So yes, I have a female on here. Hello, Robbie. She says, yes, I want romance. So that's one of the things that women often say, and they feel that their husbands don't romance them. And it's not typically in the way that men may think women want to be romanced. So you have to find out what your wife likes, because each woman has individual taste in how they want to be romanced. So let's say one woman likes flowers. Another woman might like her back to be massaged, or for her feet to be massaged. And this is where guys get into problem with women. And I will tell you this right now. So let's say that your wife likes her feet massaged, or her back massage, or her body massage. Oftentimes men will see that as an indicator for sex. And that's when it usually blows up in their face and they're like, wait, what did I do? I gave her a massage and now it's time for us to have sex. And then the next time you want to go and massage her, she won't want you to, because she doesn't want to have sex. She just wants you to be close with her and touch her and romance her and be intimate with her. And also, if you're smart about it, this is how you tease her in a way. So if you're touching her and doing all that and you walk away and you don't put pressure on her, you're more apt to have her come to you at another time and maybe initiate sex. And one of the biggest things I hear from men is, wow, it would be really nice if my wife initiated sex sometimes. And so if that's really what you want, then you have to be creative and try to figure out what turns her on outside the bedroom. And again, women like to be mentally teased, they like to be physically teased, but they don't want the whole enchilada all at one time. So let me give you, let's see, an example of something like this. So women can get turned on by, let's say, a man that is in really good shape. I'm just giving you an example. And he's wearing a tight pair of Levi's and he has his shirt off. To her, that is going to turn her on, whereas a man is going to want to see the naked body. She wants to see she wants to be surprised as to what's in the pants. She doesn't want it all out in front of her. And in fact, women are not visual in the way men are, where men think that they're just going to show them a dick pic and women are going to get excited. Women don't get excited over those things. Men get excited over seeing women's bodies in different pieces, not pieces, but parts. Like they can look at breasts and get excited, or women's genitalia and get excited, because men see things differently. But women don't look at men that way. And so you really have to take the time to find out what turns your wife on. Do you really know what turns your wife on? And one of the problems is that when a man continues to push for sex, that's one of the things that is going to push her away. And so it's best to not be forthright and push her into it, but to be more romantic. Okay, so first of all, the people that are out there watching, where are you from? I always like to know where you're from, which state, which country. If you want to just give a quick chat with that, I will hold on for a second and take a sip of my coffee. What did it see? Eric said, my ex and I broke up over politics. I'm right and she was wrong. Let's see. Folky from Hamburg, Germany. Very nice. Eric, you're from Southern California. Yeah, it's really interesting to see where everybody comes from and who is watching the videos. And it really is international. And it's fantastic to see that everyone comes together to get some information on how to make your relationships better. And you know what? The point being is that when you get married, there are ups and downs in a marriage, but once you can get through them or work through them, you can have a really wonderful, successful relationship. So let's see. X-rays from Pennsylvania. Adrian. Okay, so we have a question here. Hello, if I will not ejaculate a month can cause prostate problems. So that's more of a kind of a medical, technical problem. Prostate problems. I don't know if it'll cause prostate problems, but usually your body has a pattern, and if you are not ejaculating for a month, it can cause some other issues. It can cause sometimes someone might get depressed, or they'll have lack of libido. Prostate problems, I haven't really seen that before. I'm not sure if you want to explain a little bit more what the actual issue is with the prostate. Folky says, very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Michael. You're welcome. So let me go on with this topic, because one of the issues is men and women, again, are different. They think differently, and their turn-ons may be different. And in my book, I just want to read one part to you, and this may explain how women differ from men. And so if you haven't had a chance to look at my book, this is my book here. You can get it on Amazon. And so when it comes to sex, the 3 areas of trust, women have to have these in order for them to feel like they want to be open and sexual and feel a little bit more free in their relationships. So I'm just going to go through them real quick with you, and then you can ask some more questions. Okay, so both men and women need to trust their partners enough to allow themselves to be open to intimate sex. Some women are unable to reach orgasm during intercourse or have pain or fear issues regarding sex because they do not feel secure enough when they are with their partner. Trust for women can be defined by the following 3 levels. Number 1, physical. Do I feel safe with my partner, knowing that he will not hurt me physically? This can also equate to a woman being physically and emotionally ready for sex. Is she aroused enough and ready? Is her partner gentle and understanding? All these fall under physical trust. The next one is survival. Do we have a place to live, a roof over our heads, and enough to eat? Are the children taken care of? Can my partner protect and provide for me? While these can equate to financial stability for some, the reality is that a woman can only experience pleasurable sex and fully immerse in the sexual experience when her basic needs are met. Number 3, emotional. Is he faithful to me? Do we have an understanding that he truly cares for me? If I get attached to him emotionally, will he be there for me when I need him? Is he going to abandon me emotionally after we have sex? So these are 3 important issues for women. And for men, if you want to have that good, close sexual relationship with your wife, keep those in mind, that she that all of those things are met in your relationship, because that'll make her more relaxed. It'll make her more interested. She can be free of what she's thinking about. And for women, one of the biggest problems for them to get interested in sex, or even for them to have an orgasm, is when they have so much on their mind and they're not able to relax. Because in order for men and women to have an orgasm, they actually have to get in a different state. So there's a different part of your brain that kicks in right before you're able to have an orgasm. And that is where you allow yourself to lose control. And so if you cannot let go and you cannot be relaxed, then you will not be able to have an orgasm. And again, that's for both men and women. But for women, it tends to happen more often than men. One of the reasons why is because men actually work on that part of it, because for them, everything's front and center and visual. And for women, they don't have to work on it as much because in a relationship, they can learn to fake their orgasm, which actually is a bad thing because then she is not enjoying her orgasm, and she is also not telling her spouse or her boyfriend what he can do to make her have it, or how the sexual experience can improve for her. So let me take a couple of questions real quick here. Let me see what we have. Okay, so Michael Shaw says, do women have sexual fantasies like men? That's a good question because, okay, number one, women tend not to have as many sexual fantasies as men. And so when men say to a woman, what is your sexual fantasy? Sometimes women will say, I don't have one. And it'll be like, what do you mean you don't have one? Because most men have sexual fantasies, whereas not all women do have sexual fantasies. It doesn't mean that they can't have sexual fantasies. So it's a little bit different. And what they fantasize about is also different. So where men may fantasize about a sexual situation or another person, women tend to fantasize about relationship fantasies. And so it's a different type of a fantasy. And she may not be as willing to talk about that because it might be something that she had in the past, or it might be something more personal, and it's not really something that is so sexual. Whereas a man may have a fetish for something, and women tend to have less fetishes. His fantasy is going to be more graphic, and hers is going to be more on a romantic, emotional level. Not to say that women can't have that if it's something that they've cultivated, but generally they haven't as much as men have. So I hope that answered that question there. So let's see. So Adrian asks, if I masturbate 21 times a month, is that normal? Well, there really is no normal for that. It really depends on each individual and what the normal is for you. So if somebody's normal is every day, then that's going to be normal for them. But the second part of that is, what are you masturbating to? And the third part of that, is it affecting your sex life as far as your marriage in a negative way? So those are all things that you have to weigh into that, because again, if you're masturbating so much and your partner is not, and it's making your sex life out of sync, then you may want to cut down on the masturbation a little bit and kind of do it in a slower process so that your sex drive is not so high as compared to hers being so much lower. So that might be something that if you're comfortable with your spouse, you can talk about, but it definitely is something that you can adjust. And it's all about balance. So that's the thing that we try to work for in life, is how do we balance out parts of our life? And if you find that you're really out of balance and maybe you're masturbating so much that it's taken you out of balance in your life, you really have to think about what to do and how to fix it. Let's see. There's another question here. Okay, something got held for review. On my messages, if you're putting anything like graphic or you're using, body part terms, it probably won't show up. And sometimes even, they take it down. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If some of you have been listening to videos, you will notice that YouTube took one of my live videos down, and it happened to have been a great video. I was talking about cuckold relationships, and I was explaining how women feel in that situation. But of course, somebody at YouTube obviously has, spent 12 years, 13 years in school and knows what's best for us to listen to. So I'm being condescending, obviously, but it is really irritating with all of the censorship going on that you have to even be careful, of using terms, regular terms, to get your point across. So there's a lot more that I want to say to you, but if I'm too graphic, they'll just, not even graphic, but if I'm talking about what a person's sexual organs are and the proper name for it, the video might be taken down. So, okay, let me get back to some of the information that I wrote down. And I wanted to, the different, because I don't talk about them as often in my videos, I mostly talk about men. And it's really important that men understand how a woman functions sexually, because not just physically, but also mentally, so that you can tap into what your wife is thinking, so that you can become a better lover, so that you can romance her more. Because the idea is that you want to have good sex in marriage, you want your wife to desire you, and you want to have that intimacy that only the two of you can share together. And that's one of the things that I also tell women working with them, is that if you're not feeling sexual anymore and you just don't want to have sex, you're in a marriage, and what is your husband supposed to do? You don't want him to go out and have sex with other women. You don't want him to masturbate. So, the two of you got married with the commitment that you're also going to be each other's sexual partners. And so for women, if you are having a problem and you have lost your sex drive, then it's important that you do something about it. You figure out, is it a hormone issue? Because with some women it is. Is it a relational issue? Is it that you're stressed out? Is it that you're pissed off at your husband? Women sometimes tend to be upset with their husbands and they're not able to open up and have the freedom of allowing themselves just to be open to sex or being touched, because they're just so mad at their husbands, and so they close themselves off. So it's really important that the two of you communicate and that you work through these problems. So let me just take a quick look at the questions. Hello, Patrice. Thanks for your work and your videos. You're welcome. Like I said, I'm really happy to see that women are tuning in to my program today. Let's see. Folky says, my wife loves me very much, but does not fulfill my sexual desire. That's for 20 years. What is your advice? That happens a lot, where men and women have different sexual desires. And okay, so this is going to maybe sound, well, I don't know how it's going to sound, but we are all responsible for our own pleasure. And sometimes you have to adjust things in your marriage in order for your marriage to work. And so it's not always about your wife fulfilling your sexual desire. And oftentimes that happens. And if that is placed above the marriage, then you're always going to go into it feeling like you're never going to have what you really want. So you have to go into it with the attitude of you're going to compromise on certain things when you get married. And so your fantasy may not be fulfilled by your wife, and her fantasy may not be fulfilled by you, but the two of you do the best you can to please each other and work on other aspects of your marriage. Because I've seen with a lot of men, they want their wives to fulfill their sexual fantasies and so on and so forth. And they get frustrated when it doesn't happen. And then they push for certain things. And I've seen in some relationships where it ends up even destroying the marriage, only to find out that when you meet somebody else, they're not going to fulfill those desires either. So it's something that you have to decide how important it is for you and kind of adjust the way that you think about it. So that's the best I could do for that question. But that was a good question. And again, it's about compromise and balance and, putting the marriage at the top, and each person's desire is not at the top, because remember, you're in this relationship together. So you have to compromise with it, and you have to work things out, because, this idea that the grass is always greener on the other side, well, it's not. That's why relationships in the beginning, they go through this honeymoon phase. That's why it's called the honeymoon, where you're excited to be with each other. Maybe you're having all this great sex, but that's not reality. That's not what happens in the lifetime of a marriage. And if you go into the marriage thinking that this is how the marriage is going to be, or that you're always trying to get that back, then you're missing out on the present moment, on the daily stuff, on what you can get from the marriage, other aspects of the marriage. So if the sexual part becomes so big and so consuming, they miss out on all the other wonderful things that the relationship brings. So let's see what we have here. Patrice said, real people with real relationships. Very true. As a woman, I find it really hard to ask for what I want. I think that gets in the way because he expects it to be easy for me. So with women, sometimes they do have a problem asking for what they want. And one of the ways that you can work with that, Patrice, is the game that I was talking about, where you put the little questions in the box so it's not so in your face, and you can each put little questions in a box and maybe pick it out and see what the other person said, and then maybe you can expand on it. The other thing with women too is sometimes women feel like if they say how they really feel, it's going to upset their husband. And with that being said, there are ways to say something, but you have to tell your partner how you feel. So it's really important to communicate, because nobody can read each other's minds. And especially with men and women oftentimes think that men know what they're thinking. And truly, men usually don't know what women are thinking. In fact, it's really important that women tell men what they want, how they want it, give them a certain amount of directions, because men usually, when they guess at what a woman wants, they don't always get it right. And so they stop trying. Or if a woman doesn't come out and say it because she feels like, her husband should know, they don't know. That's the one thing that I find with couples when working with them, is they really, really, men don't know. And I had one situation that I think was an interesting dynamic, is they were getting ready to go on a road trip. This is a couple. And she was wanting to talk to him while he was putting the luggage in the back of the car. And she wanted to go over some things that were bothering her and talk to him. And he just finally snapped at her. And they came in, we talked about it. And realistically, he said, all I wanted to do at that moment, the only thing I could think of was how to put the luggage in and make sure that we safely got into the car, that the car was working, and that our trip would be fine. And for her, it was the perfect time to, maybe talk about some issues that were bothering her. And so it's really important, number one, timing, but also to understand some of those unique differences between men and women, and that men are more apt to listen to relationship issues when they're not concerned about safety issues or some other stressor that's going on in their life. So one of the best ways for couples to talk about things is for them to pick a time and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. When's a good time for you? And then the two of you can sit down and have a conversation about it. And so you know that each other is listening. Let's see. You're welcome. So this is the one area that I think couples, and I'm talking about communication, the one area that couples can work on more. And once they are open with each other and they can talk to each other, it does get easier. But in relationships, don't be afraid to tell each other how you feel, but do it in a way that is nice. So you're not going to come out and blame somebody. You're going to say from your own perspective, this is how it makes me feel, and explain why you feel that way. Because in that sense, you're not threatening them. You're not putting them down. You're basically just saying how something affects you. And so it's positive. It's not negative. And in the same instance, let's say that you want to tell them how you feel about something, tell them how you feel, but then tell them what they can do. So don't leave that part off. So another instance that I'll give you is I had a couple that she wanted him to put the dishes away, and he wanted to help. But what was happening is she didn't tell him how she wanted the dishes to be put away, and he was putting them away in a way that she didn't like. And so that presented a problem for the both of them because neither one of them told each other the right directions. And this may be silly, but this is where communicating is so important. And so then he stopped wanting to put the dishes away, and then she said, oh, you don't help me anymore. And it was all miscommunication because she simply wanted the dishes put in a certain way because it was easier for her to unload the dishwasher, but she never told him what she wanted. And so when he did it wrong, she would get upset, and then he would get frustrated. And it was just about simple communication between the two of them, explaining and being specific about what you want. So let me read a couple more of your questions. So Michael, let me see if I can actually read your question on here. Let's see. If the wife doesn't want intercourse, but is happy to pleasure her husband, so he has an orgasm, should the man just let this happen, or should he try harder to please his wife and find mutual pleasure? That's a complicated question, because obviously when you're in a relationship, you want the other person to be having pleasure with you. So you want it to be that both of you are enjoying the sexual experience together. And it sounds with a question like that, I would have to ask you many more questions to actually answer it. But it doesn't sound to me like it is a mutual pleasing experience. And I would say after a while, she would see it as more of a duty in a way, because she's actually not getting off on it. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a long-term solution, but if it's working for you guys, then it's working. Okay, let's see what else. I hope I answered that for you, Michael. I'm not sure. Patricia, I wish it was more socially acceptable to talk about the differences between men and women. Seems like people these days get upset when I want to discuss it, but the differences are very real. Yes, absolutely. There's definitely differences between men and women, and it's wonderful because those differences can actually complement a relationship. And discussing the differences is so important because then the two of you understand each other better and you can celebrate those differences instead of trying to become, you know, more masculine or more feminine. And I think for women, especially in the workplace, sometimes they feel like they have to become more masculine when in reality, femininity can be very, very strong. So a good feminine presence, women feeling strength and femininity is something that I don't think is discussed enough at all. And men love when women use their femininity to enhance the relationship. And on the same topic, women love masculinity. And so masculinity can be a beautiful thing. Masculinity can make a woman feel safe. It can make her attracted to her husband. And so these two things are rooted in biology. And it's not something that we can disregard or take away or pretend like the differences aren't there because they are. And if couples can celebrate that, it really can enhance the marriage. And so I do think that is a great point, and I think it's something that we need to get back to. And it's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. You're welcome, Michael. Let me get back to this masculinity and femininity, because I think that things have gotten so mixed up in society today, and we are made to feel bad about feeling feminine. So for women, I think sometimes women are made to feel bad about being feminine because supposedly femininity is supposed to be weak. But in reality, women, and I'm not talking about a feminist, I'm talking about femininity, a woman using her beautiful God-given mind and her sensuality and her wisdom and her tenderness, her lovingness. All of those things are so important in a relationship, and women really can bring that into a relationship. And also the nurturing. Men like to be nurtured. There's no doubt about it. I hear from many men how much they wish their wife would nurture them. And we're not talking about in a mother, child relationship. We're talking about in a marriage, nurture their husband, where they're enjoy cooking dinner for him, or they like to be around him because they like the way that he makes her feel. He makes her laugh. And so, there's this nurturing quality that men still want in a wife, that softness, that femininity. On the same hand, women still enjoy the masculinity, the safety, the thing that a man can maybe. I'm not trying to be stereotypical, I'm just being honest. Women like men that can fix things, for instance. Women like men who can go out and hunt and bring home the food so that she can cook it. This is still something that men and women enjoy doing, and it's not something that we should say is a bad thing. It's something that can complement each other in a relationship. And there's nothing wrong with traditional values. We've gotten so far away of that too. And if you notice, the further away we get from that, the less people are getting married, the less people are purchasing a home, the less people are having kids, and the more problems we're having, because it's really that basis that we start from, the male female traditional values, that, I think people still want in their lives, but they're told that maybe that's old fashioned. But in reality, it's not. People still want that in their lives, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that we should be talking about it more often. We should go out there and talk to each other, and then make it okay, and make it so that people are not putting it down. Because oftentimes you'll see in a lot of articles in major magazines that they're putting down the traditional family, they're putting down the wanting to get married, they're putting down wanting to have children. And there's so many young girls from, the time that they're younger, that they still dream about wanting to get married and have a husband and have a family. But none of that is talked about anymore. And so all of these other things are talked about that are somewhat artificial and made up. And so I do think it's important to get back to those values. And I will take two more questions, and then I will go. Okay, so let's see. Natasha. Hi, Natasha from Melbourne, Australia. Love it. So Patrice says, I've been married for over 10 years and I'm wanting to get back to a more traditional woman role, not stereotype, just approaching the real differences. It's making my relationship better. You know what? Thank you for saying that, because I know so many women who actually have gone back into some more of the traditional role, especially during COVID. It's been really interesting because they're not outside working. They're sometimes have taken their work home, or they're not working as much, and they're able to appreciate their home again, spend time with their children, spend time in their relationship, work on the relationship, cooking, keeping the house. All of those things can bring women great pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's one of the unexpected things that came out of this, I will say, horrible lockdown situation, is the couples that got stronger in their relationship, and the couples who maybe were having troubles in the relationship, unfortunately, a lot of those relationships didn't work out. But I think it brought back some of the feeling of wanting to be back in the house, not wanting to run around all over the place and doing a million different things, but really honing in on the family, honing in on the relationship between the husband and the wife, wanting to, cook dinners again instead of all that fast food, and having even family dinners together. I've talked to a lot of people that haven't had, consistent family dinners together, and now they're doing that. And that's one of the things that this has done, is it's kind of brought the family back in together again. So you know what? I am going to end on that note, and I want all of you to have just a fantastic day, and just bring the positive energy into your life. Take time to do stuff that makes you feel good about yourself and love yourself. And when you do that, you have the ability to really love. All right. As you know, I believe everyone deserves to have a healthy sex life, and so do you. Make it a fantastic day.